James and Pauline are on the list right here, but you have Freshkorn throughout.
Steve Miller.
Yeah, great. And your connection to all this, Steve, is what?
Mabel Freshkorn is my grandmother.
Okay.
I always say Freshkorn, even though everybody says Freshkorn, because it's spelled so many different ways. I think originally it was basically pronounced Freshkorn.
F-R-I-S-C-H?
It could go a lot of ways. It's F-R-I-S-C-H-K-O-R-N or C-O-R-N. My theory on it, from running around cemeteries so often, is that, and to look at the stones down at this cemetery, my theory is the spelling was changed depending on who the stone cutter was. If you look at every stone that's spelled Freshkorn, the design and the letter shapes and the letter style is the same. You look at the ones that are Freshkorn, it's a different lettering, different design, different stone. And a lot of times in the old days, people didn't write and they weren't quite as literate. You'd go to the stone cutter and tell him what you wanted verbally. He'd write down what he heard. So I think that's where the spelling, even though there's all kind of legend about why the spelling kept being changed, personally, from seeing cemeteries in Virginia and like when you get down south, you got to figure in the 1800s, you didn't have a stone readily prepared before somebody died. So they were in the ground, then you ordered the stone. And you ordered the stone when you had the money and could go to a stone cutter. So you'd get the variations in the spelling. But I did find the other day on, I think it was one of the ancestry things, that Freshkorn, the origin of the name is supposed to be a Jewish name. And naturally it means what you'd think. In one of the censuses, my grandmother, Mabel, shows as living with Michael, one of the Michael Freshkorns, rather than with James as a baby. Now they have her age as or her birth date as a range instead of an exact date, and it says, like, you know, between 1904 and 1906, we'll say. I can't see there being two different Mabels, so for some reason she showed up on the census for the other, like however many years later, she's showing up as living with the Michael Freshkorns rather than with her father James. Why? I don't know. Tracked down was if you go down to the cemetery, when you come in from the church end, the cemetery's on the bend, you continue on past that, you'll come to a crossroads and there's Freshkorn Road. So their farm has to have been there somewhere. Okay. Now, where and which one, I don't know, but the road's named after them. Freshkorn, from what I can tell, they own, and like I said, if you got some internet access, I can probably track down the church. And then I can pull up the church history site, and it lays it all out as far as the Freshkorns and the building of the church and who all was in the area. And I mean, it's pretty clear. And it, like I say, it lists the first child, and I think the first child was actually a Freshkorn. Which, when you look at some of the Freshkorns, you say, geez, they even actually got into church?
Now, there is a cemetery out here in the township, North Swickley Township. I think it's off Big Knob Road. Mike knows where it is. And I remember Granddad taking me back there a long time ago. I was probably 12, 15, maybe younger. And he showed me the cemetery and a lot of the tombstones with various spellings of Freshkorn on them. And there was a barbed wire fence that went along. Of course, that's a long time ago. That fence may not be there. But he used to go out and take care of that cemetery sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we found him.
1875.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at this, Pete.
No, it won't stand because the
so this
pins are out of it. This is the old man.
Yeah. Hey, Helen. Yeah. Come here.
So he's the one that came from Germany then.
Well, we don't know. Okay, so here's your mom on this
Michael,
line.
Jim's grandfather. Daniel.
It's Jim's.
James is my great.
Yeah,
this is my great-great. He's my triple great.
Okay, so did we find him? You found him.
Who are we looking for?
This is my great-grandfather. This is grandfather.
Michael's over,
grandfather.
yeah, Michael's over here with the replacement stone.
Okay. Is that the one we took?
I don't know if he did or not. He's next to his brother. They've got the marble with the metal on top.
1801.
1801. Okay, that's older than one I saw.
Yeah, 1801.
Died in 1875.
That matches.
Now, since he's here and she died the very next year, she should be right behind you.
So 3 generations are here, at least.
Yeah, at least.
Sally Ann Hyler. Well, my mother and Jerry's father were brother and sister.
And your mother's name was?
Mabel.
The oldest of the 4 children?
Right. Well, there was Mabel and then Mike and then, Franny and then Hilda. Yeah, I remember him.
What was he like?
Actually, I remember going out to his house. It was just the 2 rooms, really. They didn't have running water. They didn't have electricity, nothing really. I do remember that he used to send Mom out to the barn after dark for some unknown reason so that she wouldn't be afraid of the dark. That's one thing I remember her telling me. He was, I think, kind of stern man. From what I understand, like when he would go, he worked for other farmers or 2 or something, and when he would leave in the morning, he would tell the kids what they had to do while he was gone. And they had to cut corn or something, and they had to have it done by midnight when he got back. And one of Mom's uncles, which I don't know who, would come and help because they would be in trouble if they didn't have it cut when he got home. And I know she used to say by the time she walked to school, the day was half over. And so, she had it rough, really. Yeah. Never had a baby doll. And then this Christmas before she died, I bought her a baby doll, a Christmas doll. So she really never had much. One thing with Mom, she was married before Dad. Paul Wallace. His name was Chuck Wallace. And they weren't married. Well, I don't know how long they were married, but they had Paul. And then she divorced him. And then, I don't know how many years later, she met Dad. Okay. And she worked at the pottery in between, I know that. But
what pottery?
The Shenango pottery in Newcastle. The 3 girls got together a lot. Of course, Uncle Mike was at Rochester, and then, of course, Florida.
What year were you born?
1930.
1930.
That's also my birth date.
Oh.
My birthday and the year I was born are the same numbers, in the same order.
What year were they married? Do you remember?
September the 4th, 1928. He was working with some fellow in Newcastle, and he was telling him about his date, and Dad says, you think that does she have a sister? I might like to go out with her. So he arranged a date for my mother and Dad.
Was it sort of a blind date?
Yeah. Did
they talk much about it? I mean, do you remember your mother talking about
No, I don't.
the dance or anything like that?
Oh no, I don't.
Was it love at first sight?
I don't know. I think it was on my dad's part.
Okay.
Yes. And my mother was pretty feisty. She didn't take any crap from anybody, especially him. So she went to work for St. Joseph Lead Company in Monaca, PA, and she wound armatures for motors.
And during the war, and your dad, Mike, he worked for a steel company?
Spang Chelfant in Ambridge.
What did he do there?
He was pipe. He just threaded pipe for the oil wells. Now I think they use some sort of plastic, but at that time they used pipe, so they could screw it into each other. He had a sister Mabel, Franny, and Hilda. Yeah.
Did you, growing up, did you spend much time with Mike's side of the family? Did you get family reunions? Was there much?
No. Oh, no. No. My dad went to visit them once in a while, and he took my mother and my sister and I with him. No, my father didn't talk much. And he worked shifts, too. No.
Did he ever say where the family was from in Germany?
No.
No. What about Pauline Studer's family?
You know what? Pauline Studer, who was married to my grandfather Freshkorn, died in November of 1929, and I was born in 1930, so I didn't know her.
Yeah, my grandfather Freshkorn.
Yeah.
He was a very burly, big guy, and big belly on him and bald head, and he would come and visit Mike, and Mike would sit on the porch, and when he came at Christmas time, he always brought Gerry and I an orange and a goose egg. And we were just so excited to get this goose egg because it had 2 yolks in it. And he'd personally, when you go get your sister and I want to give her something, and he gave her a goose egg and an orange.
Yeah, we did.
And a Merry Christmas.
Did you eat the egg then, like a
Yeah.
scrambled egg?
Oh yes, we ate it to watch the 2 yolks.
Oh, how fun.
And we ate it with toast. And my mother didn't get any, and neither did my dad, but he gave us this big egg. That was a treat.
What did he do for a living? Do you remember what?
My grandfather?
Yeah.
Yeah, he raised chickens and he sold eggs on Saturday at the open market.
Did he live on the same kind of farm that your dad was raised? Did they live in the same homestead?
Mm-hmm.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
Where was that? Do you remember?
In back of Elwood City. And every year he would harvest. He'd kill a cow or a sheep, and my dad went out to help him slaughter.
No.
And I went out a couple times too, and they had me washing things. But I thought that was a real cool thing. When I went out to visit him, Granddad Freshkorn, it was a cool thing because he had kerosene lamps. And a pump. You pump the water into the sink. And so they'd always stay at nighttime, and him and Josephine, his girlfriend, would play cards with my mother and dad. And I'd go to bed, but Gerry would stay up and watch. But it was the coolest thing because they played by a big kerosene lamp in the middle of the table. And there was a kerosene lamp over by the pump that you could get a drink of water, but you had to use the pump. That was cool. Mabel was, I think, the older sister, and she was the mother of Sally and Sonny, and she was a farm girl. They lived. It was hard. It was hard living. They had lived with us for a while, but then during the Depression, that was a pretty hard time. Franny was Elmer's mother, and she and my mother didn't like each other. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't see much of Franny.
Was there a reason?
Yeah, Carl. She had Carl and Elmer, and we had rheumatic fever about the same time, and Carl died.
So she was a little envious that.
Well, her attitude was, I don't know why it wasn't Maybelle. Why did Carl have to die? Well, my mother was upset with that. Mm-hmm. And because of that, but you know, she didn't say too much, but then Franny said, Mike, I don't know why you married a city girl, because she's so stuck up. So consequently, we didn't see Franny much, but saw Mabel a lot and saw Hilda a lot.
What was Hilda like?
She was very nice. She and Hilda and I got along real well. I liked her, and Patsy, but Hilda was very nice. She was a nice aunt, and I saw her more than I did the others.
She was the baby.
Baby?
Mm-hmm.
And the other siblings' names were what?
Mike, Franny, and Mabel. We lived in the country my whole life, which is right at the Ohio-Pennsylvania border.
And your dad's name was?
Storty.
And did your mom talk much about home life?
Nope, she sure didn't.
Do you suspect any reason why? Was it good, bad, or indifferent, or just didn't talk?
I don't think it was good at all, but she really didn't talk much. Mother was close with her siblings.
What did she do for a living?
Nothing.
Nothing.
She never worked. She was a housekeeper, homekeeper. She went back to, her mother died when she was 7, and she went back to live with Jim Freshkorn. They had been separated, and she was living with her mother. And when her mother died, she had to move back home with him. And she said that she had to cook at 7. She had to cook on the farm, and she chopped wood, and she had a bone cut out of her foot where she hit her foot with an axe when she was chopping wood. And she said she would clean the chickens and cook chicken from the age of 7. Farm? No, it was just a farm.
He would make breakfast for them. And one time she broke her arm, and she was afraid to tell him. And it finally hurt so much one night that she went out and she told him. And he wrapped it. And did you ever notice?
Yeah, that's right.
He wrapped it so tight that she always had marks. But he didn't take her to the doctor. She was 7 and she was the baby, and everybody else. And I guess the reason why he could go and get her is because at that time that was his legal daughter. Sure. And I don't necessarily believe that Pauline's parents wanted to give her up, or who she was staying with wanted to give her up. I don't think they had a choice. He liked to dance, Jim Freshkorn. Did anybody tell you about that? Okay, he loved to dance. He loved to square dance. And he was evidently a very good dancer. He was light on his feet. And that's where she met Patsy.
Oh, okay.
At a dance, he took her.
Well, I knew it was a dance. I didn't know that she was. I wondered how she got to it.
It was a square dance, and evidently she and her father would go to the square dance often. And in fact, sometimes she called at the square dance. And the first time she got up to call at the square dance, she was very dumbfounded and she couldn't open her mouth. And some guy in the crowd started with that Allman left, and that got her started. And then she would call sometimes at the square dances. But Jim Freshkorn did not want her dancing with Patsy and didn't want her to see him. And she used to sneak out. Anybody tell that part?
No.
And he had a girlfriend, Jim Freshkorn. You know about that?
Oh, he had 2. I didn't know about the second one. He had Josephine, and I remember Josephine. Her name was Josephine Moorhead, and she was a very tall woman. And when Mother was still with him, I think Josephine, but there was another one, but I don't know who that one was, and I never got to see that one. And Mother used to visit Josephine Moorhead when after Jim Freshkorn died. Now, I do remember him a little bit. And eventually, he didn't like your father, but they did some work together. And they came to accept each other. And when we would visit, Jim Freshkorn would put me on his knee. And I have this dimple. He would kiss me in my dimple, and he would give me a cookie. And they were like a ginger cookie, and they either had pink or white frosting. And that's all I remember about him. I don't remember anything else. He wasn't real tall. He was heavy. And he had a large stomach.
And he was mean.
Yes.
My Uncle Mike always said never talked fondly about him.
I don't think anybody ever talked fondly about him.
Except Mother didn't say much about him.
Mother never criticized him.
What was your mother's relationship like with her sisters?
Very close. Mother loved Aunt Mabel, and she loved Aunt Franny.
It seems like your mother was sort of the pivot person.
But I think
everybody loved her.
Your dad favored my mother.
My grandfather favored your mother very much.
Yeah.
Mike favored, and she favored Mike. Now listen, if there's a pecking order in the barnyard, she favored her brother Mike. The last time I took a ride with him, and he was behind the wheel, and this is a true story. We are going to the lake, and I'm going with him. And my sister and I are in the back seat, and there was a detour. You couldn't go up Route 18. And somehow we're coming down this hill, and the old man was a terrible driver. And we flew over these railroad tracks, and I made a bargain. And I don't say this lightly. I said, God, if you get me, I'll never, I promise, ever get in the car with him again. And I didn't.
You didn't really know anything about Pauline's parents or her family?
No, just that she had that pulmonary pneumonia.
Oh, okay.
Oh, because he threw her out of the house.
But I didn't find that out until your family told me that. I just thought she got pneumonia.
And died, but he locked her out of the house in the
Mother
winter.
would never tell us anything like that. Never.
And then she got
She wouldn't
pneumonia
say
and
anything.
died. Of course, he has no fond memories of Jim Freshkorn whatsoever. And my theory has always been that I think that's why my mother was so special to Uncle Mike. I think him being the oldest and the male, that he really felt horrible that my mother had to go back there and live, and there was nothing that he could have done. But I think that ate at him.
Well, Aunt Mary used to buy Mother something for school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he felt powerless, and he
was at that time. That was his daughter, and he was entitled to go get her, and he did.
But nobody wanted her there.
In fact, the earliest recollection I have was as a baby sitting in one of those round porcelain tubs on the kitchen counter in her sink in the old farmhouse, and I'm nearly positive it was Mabel. I believe she was giving me a bath. Yep. They had a farmhouse that was on a hillside out in, now I'm not sure where it was, North Swickley Township somewhere. And now I don't remember the water pump, but I understand that instead of running water, they had a water pump in the kitchen. But that's the oldest recollection I have. And I must have been pretty young to be getting a bath in one of those little round porcelain tubs. Right. I never heard them talk too much about their parents. Now, Granddad was sometimes, Mike, would sometimes tell stories, but that was a rare event. Right. And I remember his telling the story about the time he ran over the cow with the milk wagon. Mm-hmm. And, but no, I don't remember them talking too much about life on the farm as they were growing up. Now, when Granddad retired, he did have some heart problems, but they hadn't affected his work. In fact, he hadn't told anybody about them. And not too long after he retired, I don't know whether it was a couple of years, he had that heart attack. And then everybody knew he had a bad heart. Yeah. But he recovered from that and lived. Happened. You were with him when that happened? I
drove him to the hospital from
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
The County Lake, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I remember going up to visit him, but they would only allow one person in for 10 minutes or something every hour.
Yeah, I was terrified.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have a number of Mike Freshkorn stories, but the one that comes to my mind first is he and I were driving up to Conneaut Lake to the cottage, and this was early in the spring, probably our first trip up. We used to go up sometimes and clean the cottage a little bit, and I was happy to go up with him. It was just the two of us. And we were driving his 1956 Cadillac. Now, he traded that car in '64, so this had to be before 1964. I didn't have my license yet. And we were on a road near Shakelyville that we called the Oompy Doomp Road, because it had a lot of ups and downs and dips, and if you didn't take it slowly enough, you could actually fly out of your seat when you went over the top. It was like those bumps at the end of a roller coaster ride. So we're driving up there, and he pulled off the side of the road in a spot where there was room to do that. And he told me, get in the driver's seat. I said, Granddad, I don't have a license. He said, well, that's okay, we're on a back road. So, yeah, the first car I ever drove was a Cadillac. So I drove that car on the Oompy Doomp Road, and below the speed limit, no doubt. And every time there was a car coming the other way, Granddad's philosophy was take your half out of the middle, then you can move over when the other guy comes. Because he'll move over too. That way there'll be plenty of room between. Which, it's not the way I still drive, but it worked. Yeah, so that my first experience driving a car was my grandfather's Cadillac. The person at the checkout counter said to my grandmother, "Oh, and how old is your little boy?" And I looked her right in the eye and said, "This isn't my mother, she's my grandmother." Because she looked young. Her hair didn't get gray until she was much older. And she was young looking. Well, she was young. I'm not sure exactly how old she was, but if she was probably 40 at the time, if I was 8, because she was 40 years older than me. And after we left the store, she turned around and said to me, "Ricky, if someone ever says that I'm your mother, just smile and pretend it's true. You don't have to tell them I'm your grandmother."